This holiday season, a story that began with the greatest tragedy in television history.
We were canceled? Yes, I'm afraid the brainless drones who run the delivery network canceled our license. Yes, I see. Good news, everyone! Those asinine morons who canceled us were themselves fired for incompetence. And not just fired, but beaten up, too. And pretty badly.
We're back, baby!
Welcome, everybody, to episode 17 of the Pseudo Nerd Podcast for April 29th, 2016. I'm your podcast host, Josh Kiser, and joining me in the land of sitcom television, Mr. Joshua Haddix.
How's everybody doing?
And the land of comedy, Mr. Kyle Hoagland.
Jokes and jokes. What's up?
How you guys doing?
Very, very distracted right now. The TV is at it's right behind me. So I'm hurting my neck turning around to see what's going on with this draft.
Oh yeah, so a little forewarning to all of our PNPers out there. The NFL draft is going on right now, and we are paying close attention to that. So while we're giving you a podcast, we're also keeping an eye on what's going on there. So because we want to make sure we get an episode out to you guys every Friday because we care about our fans. This is the sacrifice we're making right now.
Hey, the fans come first, right? Hey, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them.
That's
true. We care about so much. We're actually sacrificing the fans because of how shitty this podcast is. So it's all about sacrifice. It's all around. So we also appreciate their sacrifice.
This is true too. Coming up in today's podcast, we're going to do things a little different. It is the end of the month. That means we're getting our list podcast in. And this month, because we didn't have any real big topic and nothing crazy going on other than the draft, but we didn't want to do too much sports-related conversation with you guys, we're gonna talk about television. The end of the television season is kind of upon us. So we're going to go ahead and give some talk about our favorite series finales. Maybe not just favorite, maybe ones that were done right, done wrong, controversial series finales, all that when it comes to the great thing known as television.
We are truly in the golden age of television, like everyone keeps saying.
I firmly believe that. We got TV all over the place. You've got shows on Netflix, Hulu. You're watching, Yahoo and other websites are picking up television shows. And then, of course, you just got the great, HBO is releasing fantastic shows, Showtime, things like that. And then just the basic cable channels. Pretty much everywhere you go now, there are some good television shows to watch. And some of them that we're going to be talking about ended recently. Others, some years ago, and maybe kind of pioneered where we're at with television.
I have to give credit to the way how readily available, I guess, watching television series, how easy it is now, because I know some of these shows that we're going to be talking about, if it's not on readily available on something like Netflix or Amazon Prime, I guarantee you I haven't seen it. I was just never really much of a television watcher, probably in our teens. I don't know why. I just never really, honestly didn't really watch a lot of TV. I was either playing video games or outside. I really didn't watch TV that much.
Look at this guy trying to have a social life and being outside.
I know.
Stuff.
What does this guy think he is?
I was I think of the four of us, I think I was the only one with a steady girlfriend in high school.
Oh, that's not true.
Oh, that's not true. I had one. As did Kiser.
Yeah, well, I also didn't know you that well in high school.
But I'll be dropping lies on the podcast, bro.
People call you out, dude. So let me ask you guys this question. Since we're talking series finales, While Hougie is not as much of a TV junkie, Haddix and I are quite the opposite. We have more than gotten our money's worth out of the Netflix account with streaming television shows and watching them. DVDs, we've DVR'd things. Haddix, what defines a good series finale for you when it comes to a television show?
You know, I was thinking about this all day today because I knew you were going to ask me that. But and I think it's a couple things. Whether it's a comedy, a drama, you know, whatever. If a season finale ties up the whole story of how many ever years it's been going on, 1, 5, 10, in the case of Smallville, if it ties in the story and leaves you satisfied, I think it's a good finale. Now, the trick to that is that's not the same for everybody. You know what I mean? That what satisfies me as a viewer might not satisfy you. So if it hits that mark, and you know, kudos if it's like a clever ending, something you didn't see coming but makes sense, that makes it even all the better. But I like it when I walk away not even necessarily happy, but just satisfied. Like, you know, I'm okay with that ending. I like where they left me with all the characters that I've fallen in love with, the storyline, all that jazz.
How about you, Kyle? In your limited experience of television series that you've gone through, what is a good series finale to you, or what is a bad series finale if you want to describe it that way? Whatever works best for you.
To me, a good series finale is one that stays true to the format of the show from beginning to end and doesn't just create some sort of, I guess, over-the-top, overly dramatic ending. There's been a couple of shows where I've seen the finale, and it's almost like they created the finale to, I guess, just try to get people to watch it and just try and make like this big grandiose ending, when really the show, as far as the beat of it, as far as the tempo of it, I guess I should say, it wasn't that way. And I think I know that one of the ones that we're going to be talking about is going to fall on this kind of category. But to me, that to me is something that, especially if it's been around for a few years, we watch a show for a reason. And don't change that reason. Don't change the way the show is.
Formula.
Just because, yeah, the formula of it, just so you can have some almost like you tried too hard to make an ending that we really didn't care to have to begin with.
That's a great call. One thing I'll add to what you guys have both said is, for me, you watched a show. Typically, series finales are done well when first of all they know that the show's they're canceling or they're ending on their own terms. That always helps it, benefits it. But then also it's a way for them, if they've gone, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be, that they're able to bring it all together in that maybe they bring back characters from previous seasons. Maybe they bring back storylines from previous seasons. They sort of tie everything together. They bring that nostalgia of like, oh man, that's why I watched that show. I remember that back in season 1, or that's a throwback here. But they keep it true. If there's a love story that's been like building for 5 seasons, they write it off the way it should be written off. They don't do anything over the top, to your point, Kyle. They just keep things true to their formula, but they've kind of tie a nice bow in it, without forcing things, without kind of getting over the top, without just really destroying something that they've been building for as many years as the show's been on. And I think as we go through our picks for shows, we're going to have some that really hit that formula that we've talked about and things like that, and then others that maybe do not satisfy us or for one reason or another, or aren't quite, maybe they missed the mark a little bit. And I'm actually going to get started today. Normally I let you guys talk first. I'm gonna talk first on this one, and I'm gonna go with the classic comedy that is Seinfeld. It went 9 seasons, and it's a show that ended on their own terms, or when I say their terms, I mean like Jerry Seinfeld's terms. I think NBC would have preferred them to stay on. And you think 9 seasons, you're like, that show's pretty much lived past its prime. Most do. This one was at like the peak of it was just as successful as they come. And they ended as they wanted to end. So what I loved about this finale, and I'll preface this by saying it was blasted. People hated this finale. And I think the reason why they hated it is because nothing happens in it. When I say nothing happens, the premise of it, and I guess we should start out, it's kind of obvious, but we should start out by saying every show we're going to talk about the finale, so there's a little bit of a spoiler issue going on here. So if we talk about a show and you're like, I don't want to know how it ends, then skip over that, and don't listen to that part.
Give us all more reasons for you not to listen to our podcast.
We try to give as many reasons as possible for people not to listen, and this is just one more by spoiling stuff. But Seinfeld ended quite some time ago, so sorry. But nothing really happens in this episode, with the exception of it opens up with the 4 of them getting arrested. And they get arrested in a typical fashion where they're just sitting on the street, they watch a fat guy get robbed, and they're making basically fat jokes about this guy and like how he's not going to get away and he can't chase after you and all this. And they get arrested for this Good Samaritan law that they weren't following. And what's great about it, what I love about this episode is they then have a trial where they're trying to find them guilty or innocent of this Good Samaritan law. And what does the prosecution do? They bring in character witnesses to say how like shitty these people have been, throughout their life, to say like, yeah, this is a string of previous events that just led up to this. And all it does is it's a great way to bring back characters from season 1, season 4, season 5. And they sort of reminisce like, oh, what happened to you? And this soup Nazi gets on there and talks about how Lane put him out of business. The one woman who's a virgin comes on and talks about how they all had a bet about who would last the longest without masturbating. And they go on and on about all those kind of things, like just like bringing back the old throwback jokes. And you're like, oh my God, like it was just so well done. And then there's moments where they're just like playing music and they're kind of showing like in between the trial, and you'll see like the soup Nazis serving dinner to Elaine's former boss or something like that. And there's all these interactions with all the characters that were like minor characters, sub characters, this and that. And it's very cool to see them all on there and to get them all, without feeling forced that they're all in there. And one more thing that it does, well, 2 things that it does is one, a lot of these, they say, oh, there's always the Jerry and Lane, dated before the show started. They were previous relationships. So I think people always thought like, oh, they're going to get back together. So they tease 2 or 3 times during this episode, like they're the plane's about to crash that they're on. And she's like, Jerry, I've always loved, and then it like straightens out. They don't do anything. And later he's like, what were you going to say? And she goes, oh, I wanted to say like, I always loved United Airlines. And they play jokes like that where they're like teasing like they're going to get together, but they never do. Nothing happens. But the best part for me then is the ending scene after they're found guilty and they're sitting in jail. And Jerry looks across at George, and he says something about the buttons on his shirt and how the buttons on his shirt, the second button is the key to the whole shirt. And George looks at him and goes, didn't we have this conversation before? And Jerry's like, I don't know. Have we? Maybe we have. Well, believe it or not, that is the opening line to the first episode of the pilot. So it's really like, to a T, tied it back to the original episode. And that's what I love that they did with this entire show, is they just, a show about nothing, they ended it on nothing, but they brought everything back to like a good reminiscence of the entire show in a nutshell, really.
I would like to know what were the people who gave like such negative reviews, which it seemed like everybody did. If they were true fans of the show, what were they expecting for it to be? If this is the show that you loved, like we were just talking about earlier, if this is the show that you loved with the formula that you thought was funny, then what you just wanted to have a like a bombshell ending just doesn't fit with the formula. So I'm just kind of weirded out about what did they want versus what they actually got.
I think it was they wanted you got to remember, this is back in the 90s. This is sort of, I don't think Friends was over yet. I think Friends was still going, but you wanted that Ross and Rachel type ending. They were cheering for that on. And I think even though Seinfeld was a show where they dated all the time, but like nobody, there was never that overall love that you wanted to see them get together. But for some reason, I think people wanted to see Elaine and Jerry get together. And I think they wanted to see, the other thing was George and Jerry were supposed to were getting called about doing their show again. And of course they got put in jail before they could do their show. I think they wanted something like that, like, oh my God, they're all going to go off and lead these successful lives, and it was going to be this like grandiose happy ending. And you just didn't have that. So I think that might be what the gripe was. And maybe now, like as time goes on, like true fans will realize like, oh, well shit, like that was actually a phenomenal ending. Haddix, I don't know if you have anything to add about the finale or as a Seinfeld fan.
Yeah, I mean, I won't add much because, not to reiterate, but I think one of my favorite things about it was that they got arrested on this Good Samaritan law, which kind of tied into just kind of how not shitty they were the whole time, but they were kind of, dicks to other people. And things
absolutely
like that,
they were. Yeah.
So I think it was funny how they did that, how they ended up getting put in jail because of this law about people being mean, that was kind of clever.
I agree completely. So that's enough about Seinfeld. Let's move on to you, Haddix, and the first choice you've got here, out of the realm of comedy and into the realm of nerd. We're going from the pseudo to the nerd, and you're talking the 10-season long Smallville.
Oh yeah, the good old Smallville, which, as those that don't know, is supposed to be a show about Superman before he became Superman, growing up, things like that, when he was in high school. Kiser and I and Adam and a couple of our other friends would watch this, not necessarily all together all the time, but a lot of times we would always watch it together, or groups of us would watch it. And it was really good in the beginning. Very, very good. Arguably, the last 4 to 5 seasons weren't good. Definitely wasn't good after Michael Rosenbaum left.
Who played Lex, for those that don't know?
Who played Lex? I'm sorry, I'm distracted by what just happened with the Browns pick.
Oh, so the Browns just traded their draft pick to the Tennessee Titans. We're going to break news in the middle of this podcast.
So what are we down to now?
We're going to drop down to, I believe they are at 15, which means the Titans are taking Laramie Tunsil, I bet. The offensive tackle that they wanted at number 1 before they traded. So for them to trade back to 15 up to this, I think that's a big deal. But anyways, back to Smallville.
Anyways, yeah, sorry. Okay. All right. Now I can really concentrate because we got a while yet. So anyway, yes, Michael Rosenbaum played Lex Luthor, who was arguably the best character of the whole TV show, which ties into the fact that, like Kiser was saying earlier, a recipe for a great finale is Michael Rosenbaum comes back for the finale, which was amazing. Because I believe there was like rumors he wasn't going to or something. I can't remember exactly. It was a while ago. But anyway.
Yeah, there was definitely some thought that he might not show up for it.
After struggling through the last, 3 to 5 seasons of this show, and it got real bad, Smallville, in my opinion, definitely delivered on their finale. I think they listened to what people wanted, maybe even kind of knew what people wanted. I mean, it's a show about Superman, so you want to see Superman, even though their motto all along was that they were never going to, it was no flights, no tights. They were never going to show Superman in his costume, and they were never going to show him flying.
I'm glad you said that. I just want to make a quick note to that before you go on, because that was their motto, and for a show that lasted a lot longer than it should have, and they were really almost grasping at straws on what to do for every season, they never once broke that motto the whole time. So I give them credit to that.
Yeah, they definitely, and it got a little hokey towards the end. He was wearing like that red leather jacket. I mean, basically he was like dressing up, but he wasn't putting on his actual costume. You know what I mean? But anyway, season finale rolls around. They gave you every typical thing you wanted to see from Superman. He, without getting into too much of the story, he obviously eventually puts the costume on. He summons all his, the trials and tribulations he's had in the past 10 years. He like summons all this strength from that and like finally realizes he can fly, that and the help with, Jor-El that kind of tells him or whatever. And he just so happens that at the time he learns all that, Lois Lane, who snuck onto Air Force One, the plane was going down. So he flies up there and saves Lois Lane, which is, classic Superman.
Total classic Superman. Which, by the way, I love their
little version of it.
Their version of it, but also their version of Lois, I think, was very well done.
Oh,
I think that was a very good Lois.
Yeah, but she's probably my favorite Lois Lane to this point, to be honest with you. And I know that says a lot, but so they have that in there. He saves the day. Again, not to get into too many details, but Darkseid's planet Apocalypse is like collapsing into Earth, and he pushes it back out into space and saves the world. Again, classic Superman. And the best part is, after all this happens, they do the old flash forward 7 years. And I know sometimes it might seem a little cheesy when shows do that because they kind of just are like, oh, here we are, happy future. But I feel like everyone knows Superman. You know what he's doing. So that whole flash forward just lets you kind of see. I think it was like 3 minutes long right at the end. He's working at the Daily Planet. He's clumsy Clark Kent, like running into people. He actually runs into Lois and like drops all his papers on the floor. And they talk about getting married. And then all of a sudden some guy runs in and says, oh, there's a bomb in an elevator, downtown or whatever. And so Clark goes, tell the preacher or whatever that I'm going to be a little late. And he runs up to the roof, and the ending is him, pulling the old shirt open. And then, there's the S, and that's the end of the show. Like, to me, it was literally the perfect ending to a Superman TV show.
One
Especially
other point of note, origin. They play the Superman music right there then too.
Yeah, they do. Right when
they
he's like
teased
going up.
it for a while, and then right at the end they bust into the John Williams, 1970s Superman theme, which was cool.
And also in this flash forward, they don't ever show them, but you hear them. They have Perry White. Along about way, there's a Jimmy Olsen, and I mean, if you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. But so they give you everything. They give you everything that you know and love about Superman now, and the 10-year long journey that you just came on. Even though the last 4 or 5 years were really tough, and they messed up a lot of things, they gave you what you, especially in that second hour of the finale. The first hour, they kind of tied some things up. I feel like the second hour, they really just hit home. I loved it. I thought it was an amazing finale.
I agree completely. It was definitely, it really saved the show, because I thought that was one of my favorite shows, about season 5-ish. Started going downhill. By the end, I was dreading it. I was hating it, but I was watching it because I'm a masochist. And I really think that finale helped kind of, really, really brought me around to say, like, okay, overall I enjoyed that show. It didn't end in a way that it was like, that show, it was just pathetic, and it was sort of like a train wreck to see at the end.
Agreed. It to me, it had, like we talked about earlier, wrapped everything up, left you happy, went on your way. After that, everyone knows what Superman does, so you were good with how it ended. Perfect.
And now for Hougie, we're gonna move away from a show that lasted way too long to a show that was canceled multiple times. So they had kind of have a unique aspect, and I'll let you touch base on that, Hougie. The show now, Futurama.
So Futurama has a very weird timeline as far as being on TV. I believe it started having, I think it had like 3 seasons, and was canceled by Fox. They had their first finale, which was called the Devil's Hands or Idle Playthings, which a lot of people say is the best of the four. I'd probably say it's my second favorite. Like I said, I'm going to go very quick on the first three, and I'll probably talk more about the last one. But basically, the end of the first one is Fry is trying to find a way to, as always, try to get Leela to fall in love with him. And he finds out that one way of doing this was to play the holophone because she loved the music when I guess he had like parasite worms that made him intelligent, and he was able to play it. And she kind of noticed that she was kind of digging it. So, but then when he lost that ability, he couldn't play it anymore. So he made a deal with the robot devil and got robot hands to be able to articulate better. And it caused him to be able to play so well that he was, world renowned and was doing operas. And obviously he lost his regular hands, so he was kind of walking around with devil hands. Then Leela at some point becomes deaf thanks to Bender. So then she's angry that she can't hear the show, though she doesn't tell that to Fry to make him feel bad. And she ends up doing a deal with the devil to get robot ears so she could hear it, so she could finally hear it. And by the time that all happens, Fry realizes that she made a deal to marry the devil. In order to stop that, he gave back the hands so that she wouldn't have to marry him. And so now he can no longer play the music. And at the very end, when everybody had left the opera angry at him because it sucked, she stayed behind and told him, keep playing. I want to see how it ends. And the way it ends is a really shitty looking drawing of Leela and Fry holding hands and kissing and walking away. So that was the original end. And then they went into this this 4 DVD period after Fox had dropped the show. They did four like straight to DVD movies. I loved every single one of them. I thought they were probably one of the funniest things I've ever watched, and probably one of the big reasons why Comedy Central picked up the show later.
I think Comedy Central had a deal with some of those movies.
With those? See, yeah. I thought that was still considered. You know what? I think what happened was Into the Wild Green Yonder, which was the fourth one. I think in the event that something were to have gone, something went belly up, and Comedy Central for whatever reason decided not to go with it, they reserved the fourth DVD as a potential series finale.
Correct.
So the last one, or let's say the Wild Green Yonder, is the very ending of that one is. Zap Brannigan's chasing the Planet Express ship into a wormhole, into a black hole. The professor warns them that, they could go trillions and trillions of light years away from Earth. They may never return. And that was that point when Leela and Fry profess their love for each other, and they kiss for real for the first time ever on the show. And they, kind of rocket themselves right into the black hole. And that's what ends that one.
Is that a euphemism?
So, it could be. It very well could be. The third one is called Overclockwise, which was in 2011. This is the one that Bender becomes like overly omnipotent, omnipotent, kind of becomes a god, learns everything about the universe, and then after he gets powered down, he writes down like all of like world, like the universe's questions, like how old is the universe and all the things that nobody ever knew about. But one of the things he also paid attention to was what was going to happen with Leela and Fry. And we never find out loud, but they're reading this list together silently, and they're reacting with their faces, whether it's in shock or in laughter or happiness or sadness. But at the very end, they seem content and they're happy and they're smiling with each other, like as if we assume that they do become happily ever after with each other. You never really know. But that was also a good ending. But the one we're going to really focus on here is Meanwhile, which came out 3 years ago, which was at this point now the ultimate series finale. And once again, all four of these shows, by the way, were written by the same guy, Ken Keeler. He had always made it come out to being where the main focus of the show, as funny as it was the hopeless romantic trying to get this other woman just to even pay attention to him. Because the whole series, Leela almost just seems oblivious to the fact that Fry has these feelings for her. But in this one, they're dating officially in this one, and he proposes to her, and he has this button that lets him be able to go back in time just 10 seconds, and then it recharges after 10 seconds. So his whole plan was to celebrate by keeping the sunset going for as long as he possibly could to keep it romantic. And because he used the button so much, his watch and the real world time was off. So she was supposed to meet him at a certain time, and that time had already passed. And so him being depressed decides to kill himself and jumps off the building, and then realizes as he's going down that she's actually on time. She actually showed up 5 minutes early, but his watch was late, and he continuously goes and stops time and keeps going up and down the building for 10 seconds, realizing that he will never be able to actually save himself. And he actually dies. He splatters on the ground, and I think I counted like 14 times on the show. Just dies into like a pile of flesh. He ultimately gets saved by the group, thanks to Bender being able to get there in time with I think it was like some sort of like car airbag. And
he, if they run into him fast enough, he deploys an airbag. Yeah.
Right. So, but what happens is he lands safely, but then lands on the button and destroys it, causing the whole universe to freeze permanently, except for Leela and Fry, coincidentally. They end up getting married anyways, with everybody still frozen. And they live basically the rest of their lives as old and gray, seeing the entire world in its frozen state until the professor shows up when they're really, really old and says that he can fix the button. And so he does fix the button for them, and then asks them, like, you realize that if we use it now and we fix everything, we'll have no recollection of any of this ever happening. And Fry says, do you want to give it another go? And Leela says, I do. And they push the button and they start all over again. And then it ends with the very first episode. So I think it's great because every single one of those endings, it was appropriately ended by, you don't know what's in store. It's not. It almost seems like, who knows? Maybe one day they'll resurrect the show like a fifth time. Like I said, the idea of it's always there, but it gave you enough closure, and it made everyone happy. I mean, it's like every single ending made it seem like Leela either was coming around to being in love with Fry or was married to Fry. But I think all of them were solid endings. I think Meanwhile, personally was my favorite one, though.
Yeah, I mean, they do a good job, and I'll keep this brief since you kind of went through it all, but they do a good job of every single, for a show that was ended multiple times, they do a good job of still, everyone had that same theme of Leela and Fry's relationship, and for them to, at the end, to say, like, they ended up spending their whole life together, even though they went back and it's kind of forgotten all about, they still hit home, and it's the true love story of the show, and they kind of wrap that up nicely. And the other thing they do in that final finale is everywhere they're at, you see all the characters that were throughout, like all the small characters and stuff are something I enjoy with all the shout outs. They bring all the side characters around. They're frozen in state everywhere, but if you pay close enough attention, you can say, oh, here's this person here and this person there and this small character here. They're all over the place, and it was a good way to wrap up a show that was canceled multiple times. So, that's a bit of a challenge to basically have season finales and making them different, but still making them successful. And I think Futurama did a great job with that.
Yeah, it's tough enough to make one good series finale, but to actually say that I think all of them were really good, that speaks very loudly about the writing on the show.
Right, I agree. And one more quick thing, I just checked my notes from that episode. They actually open it up by going to the moon for the moon delivery, which was their first delivery.
That's right, that first delivery they ever had.
And as well as at one point, she makes a comment when she falls off into space, she has a balloon animal version of herself that she sucks the air out of to save herself because she needed oxygen. She said, the balloon life girl gave her life to save mine, which is actually a shout out to way back when Fry gave his oxygen tank to Leela to save her in a Valentine's Day episode. So there's little shout-outs like that, kind of Easter eggy almost, but I thought it was well done, kind of to that formula. And then jumps, it's kind of a, while it seems like it won't make much sense, there's actually a good segue into my show, which would be Chuck. And it is much like Futurama, a show that was not necessarily canceled, but they thought they were getting canceled multiple times. The show lasted 5 seasons. I think at least 2 or 3 times they thought the show was over and basically ended it, and then it got like a late renewal, so they're like, oh shit, and they brought it back. And basically with Chuck, they were able to make, much like Futurama, competent finales where every single one, the main overlying story is Chuck is this nerdy guy and he falls in love with this gorgeous model-like spy. And every time they kind of end it, we're like, oh, they're getting together, and then they had to bring it back. Oh, they're getting together, they had to bring it back. And the cool thing about Chuck is finally in that final finale, him and Sarah had been married by this point, so you're like, oh, what else are they going to do? Well, they have her lose her memory. And it's like, oh, okay, now there's a little bit of trouble. Are they going to actually end up together? She's like, I don't remember anything about you. I'm not in love with you. And you keep thinking throughout the episode, okay, somehow she's gonna get her memory back. She hits her head a couple of times, and you're like, oh, it's gonna spark her memory back, but it doesn't. Then they have this option where he has these glasses, and they're like, oh, there's one more thing on these glasses, she can get her memories back. And you're like, oh, well, there's a little, it's kind of a cheesy way of rewriting it in there, but okay. Well, then Chuck actually has to use the glasses to save the world, so she doesn't have all those easy ways out, or easy way to write it back in for her to get her memories. She doesn't. But instead, as they're going through this episode, what I really liked is Sarah has no memory. So she shows up back at the Buy More where Chuck works, and she's wearing the same outfit she wore in the pilot, which was like, okay, that's the cool first start. Then there's little shout-outs where she gives him a gun, and Chuck says he doesn't kill, and that was something she always liked about him. They go dancing, and they're dancing, which was, something they did on a mission together. They're on this mission, him and Sarah, and they end up going to this restaurant, and it's like the restaurant's the Mexican place they went on their first date, or it looked just like it. So there's a lot of these shout-outs to previous episodes, kind of get that nostalgia factor. They end up going to a Wienerlicious, which was a place that she worked at, a fast food restaurant she worked at when she was undercover, and she ends up going into one. And there's a lot of those little shout-outs. They bring all the characters back in. They have Jeffster, which were 2 side characters, and they have a big moment in there, and they kind of get their happy ending. But the best thing, so this whole time, all this happens, and everything's kind of, you get the sad, emotional goodbyes to the other characters, and you see everyone's kind of going on with their life, and everybody's got like a happy ending going. But the main people, Chuck and Sarah, they've saved the world, but their love story is still kind of left up in the open because she doesn't remember any of this. Where there are little hints throughout the episode, when she's at the Wienerlicious, all of a sudden she starts moving these cups around, and Chuck's like, what are you doing? She goes, oh no, they belong over here. And he's like, well, how do you know they belong over here? All of a sudden it's like her memory, there's little peaks like that throughout the episode where her like memory's coming back. Later on, she remembers the name of this virus on their first mission that they used to disable a computer program. So there's things like that. And then finally it ends with Chuck sort of talking to her on the beach, and she's like, tell me our story, Chuck. So he tells her. And then he said, his best friend Morgan always said, like, maybe just one magical kiss would give her memory back. And they sort of laugh about it. And then she says, kiss me, Chuck. So he kisses her. And it's like, it gives you hope that they're getting back together. Her memories could come back over time, but there's almost rebuilding that whole relationship. And for a show that ended that love story multiple times where they were running away together, while they got married together, all this and that, it was really a unique way of redoing the story, ending it again with some excitement, some hope, when they've been when they basically had that cancellation going on. And I really thought they did a good job with that. And Haddix, you can kind of quickly agree or disagree with me on that.
Yeah, I agree. The point I wanted to bring up, and you kind of touched on it, is in shows like that where there's the Chuck and Sarah dynamic, where it's the guy or girl, who really wants to get with the, another character, and there's just, constantly something in the way. A perfect finale is they finally get together. Well, like you said, they had gotten together so many times because they thought the show was canceling, and it was a very clever way for them to give you that whole boy finally gets girl with the fact that they were already together, with her losing her memory and stuff like that. So like they wiped her memory clean, and that way that whole episode they kind of built to the guy getting the girl, and then he finally gets her. And I love that the last sentence of that whole show was "kiss me," and then Chuck kissed her, and that was the end. It was awesome.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the way they ended that. And Haddix, you're going to be kind of on your own here because it's been a while since I've seen this, and I don't think Hoagie's ever seen it. But I think it's unique for us to discuss, and I'll let you talk about why it's a unique finale, and that will be Firefly's finale, Serenity.
Yeah, I won't touch much on the story because you really need to watch it. It's a great show, and it's a great finale, so you need to watch it. Me saying anything about the story won't do it any justice. But the good thing about it, like you said, and a good reason to bring it up, is there was only one season of this show called Firefly, and Joss Whedon is the one who directs it. And I think he had this plan laid out and these storylines laid out that were all going to end up kind of culminating in a few seasons. Well, they got canceled after one season.
Typical Fox, really just canceling people left and right.
So they were left out there. I mean, there really wasn't any ending at all. So after it got canceled, there was a huge fan uprising, and everyone wanted to see the ending and all this. And Whedon ended up raising enough money to make a movie. So they actually made a movie finale to a TV show. And like we were talking before the podcast, due to naming rights, they called it Serenity. So the movie is called Serenity, which is technically the finale to the TV show Firefly. And again, I don't want to get into too many details because without watching the whole season, might not make sense. But again, I think it delivered on what a good finale is. There were a couple of deaths in the movie, meaningful deaths that were sad to you, characters that you had kind of grown to really like. There's a huge battle, a good fight scene, here and there. And at the very end, the main character, or one of the main characters, her name's River Tam. She's kind of the one who's being tracked down this whole time. She's aboard this ship who's kind of protecting her in a sense. They know people are after her. The captain is just kind of a good guy, so he's kind of protecting her. Whatever. They have some adventures throughout the TV show, but it ends with a couple of storylines coming together, a couple of relationships that you really wanted to see kind of culminate in the finale. The captain has kind of a love interest through the whole season, and she decides to stay with him on the ship. And the main part is this bounty hunter, for lack of a better term, is searching for River Tam the whole TV show and the finale. He finally kind of comes to the good side, if you will, and kind of calls it off, lets him know that he's not going to be looking for her anymore. And the show ends by, the crew kind of coming together. She's going to be his co-pilot from now on. That's kind of how it actually ends, is Mal's the main guy, and River Tam ends up being his co-pilot, and they kind of take off to go on their many other adventures. And there's actually been some comics and things written by Whedon's brother of things that happened after the movie, and they kind of left it open. There's been a lot of talks about another sequel and all that kind of stuff, but chances are it'll probably never happen. But it was just a good ending. It tied up the story of Firefly, the TV show. It gave you a great little movie to watch, and it left you satisfied with where the characters were. So it kind of hit on all points.
Yeah, and one thing I'll quickly note is I can't think of his name, the character who dies in it.
There's a couple. The original pilot, like
right. The bigger one that dies in it, but Whedon regrets killing him off. And I think now in an age where Netflix is resurrecting television shows and things like that, I think this would be one of the shows that may at some point have been on that list. And it's like one of those, like, I think maybe part of the reason they didn't is because he jumped the gun on these deaths and stuff like that, never expecting it to get to this point.
Yeah.
But
I was reading that he actually, in his original script, he didn't kill him off, but they had him rewrite it because they didn't like it. Jump through a bunch of hoops and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, sure. And Hougie, now we're going to get on to our last one, and this is probably the most controversial of all of them that we're talking about today. And I will let you sort of talk about it, and then I will chime in when the time comes, because I'm going to be on a different side of the argument here.
Well, this is one I feel like we, as fans of the show, could easily do a podcast by itself on. So we'll try to do the Cliff Notes version of this. But yeah, How I Met Your Mother. It's been a show that we've talked about a few times on these podcasts for whatever reasons, for either references or even just mentioning the finale itself. But it was a 2-part finale. It's called Last Forever. It's centered around the aftermath of Barney and Robin's wedding. And then obviously, you're going to go the next 15, 16 years after that. And obviously an hour will cover all that, I'm sure, with enough to close everything and, tie all the strings. With the way I kind of said that sarcastically, obviously this was a really polarizing finale. Some loved it because they felt it was more of a real ending, maybe not so much a television ending. This is one of those shows where you had, kind of like with Friends, you had shippers. You had people who wanted Ted to be with Robin. You had people that wanted Barney to stay with Robin. The only consistent thing on the show was Marshall and Lily. And I'm on the side of, I think it ended the way I would have actually wanted it to end. As far as having it be, it's life, it happens, and it's whatever.
You become Spider-Man.
Exactly, and you become Spider-Man. But to be real quick about this, Barney and Robin had just gotten married. They divorce basically 10 minutes into the show, into the finale, and it creates kind of an awkwardness. Robin kind of gets back to doing her normal thing with her job, but even more because I think she felt like she needs to kind of get away from Barney, and because that kind of alienates her other friends. So they kind of have a small falling out with Robin. Obviously, at this point, Ted and Tracy are also married with a kid, and I believe the second one was on the way later. Then nothing much really happens with the show, with the episode, just kind of like your normal quirks. Marshall becomes a Supreme Court justice, and Ted lives out his dream of becoming a father with 2 kids and married to his soulmate. Barney goes back to his womanizing ways, which that's one of the things I think people got kind of upset about, was developing this guy into being like finally somebody who understands and appreciates love, to going back to being the womanizer. Knocks up his going for what it was like a month straight. He was going for 30.
The perfect month.
And knocks up number 30.
31, actually.
31, sorry. And he has a daughter, which now becomes his world. Once again, turns over that new leaf. Becomes the responsible father. And I guess the big thing is Ted's wife, Tracy, Christina Miliotti's character, passes away, kind of obviously off camera. And the whole story that the kids kind of realize is the reason why Ted is telling this story for however many seasons, 9 seasons that it was out, was to let the kids know that he really had these strong feelings for Robin, and though he loves the mother and misses her, I think he was ready to move on and try something again with Robin, which obviously the kids give him their blessing, and it ends with the blue French horn, just like from the pilot episode, just kind of like how you mentioned, things kind of tying together from the beginning. And she smiles at the window with the two dogs popping out, just like, once again, how it was at the beginning. And it's basically scenes from there. So, I'll let you, I feel like I can feel your boiled up rage on this side. So I'll let you bitch a little bit first.
So my biggest thing is I'm watching this. I watched it again yesterday, kind of removed now. It's been a couple of years since it's ended, or at least a year or two, whatever.
I think it's 2 now.
Yeah, so watch back again as the episode's going on. I'm getting I get a little teary eyed. I'm getting emotional. I'm enjoying it. Then I just get annoyed. I get so annoyed with the divorce between Barney and Robin, and I get annoyed that he ends up with Robin. And here's why. This show needed to end 2 seasons earlier with that ending, and I would have been okay with it. They spent 2 long seasons getting Ted over Robin, getting Robin and Barney together, getting you to be happy and to support the idea that Barney's settling down, that Barney's going to be with her, and that Robin and Barney are a good fit, and that Ted and Robin aren't a good fit. And in a span of 15 minutes, they shit all over that and say, oh, no, here you go, Barney and Robin, this whole 2-year-long relationship, the marriage, that's gone. Robin kind of becomes an unlikable character for most of that finale. And then Ted's wife dies, which you kind of saw coming, I think. And that's fine. And then it's like, oh, well, let's get you guys together. And it was just, I'd say they shoehorned them together, but they more like blue French horned them together, right?
You remember in that season, a lot. I mean, still even the last season of the show was very much Ted and his conflicted feelings for Robin. So I mean, he still had the locket. He still almost every episode, including I think I still laughed just because of how corny and actually it was kind of bad. The whole Robin being a balloon and floating away. Part of the
hands
episode.
down the worst scene ever.
I was about to say, I knew you hated. I thought you were going to bring that up because I know you hate that scene.
It was so fucking stupid.
I hated the scene, but like I said, I was always kind of a fan of Ted and Robin because I knew that was the whole point of the show. I mean, we know that obviously we knew from the beginning that Robin wasn't the mother. We knew from the beginning that obviously they're not dating at the end. So there's got to be some sort of end all. There was enough clues to suggest that the mother dying wasn't going to be a shocker. And at that point, you realize that it made sense to me that Robin was still single when 2030 rolls around. And because there's no pictures of Aunt Robin with the kids with Uncle Barney, it's just Aunt Robin. So it always seems like if they were married and happy in 2030, you would think that Barney would be mentioned more, or Robin being mentioned less. You know what I mean?
I'll say this, and because I agree with Hougie, I really liked it, and I think Hougie had the benefit of when he watched it for the first time was on Netflix, right, Hougie? So you basically binge watched it,
right? So I didn't have to wait and kind of let those kind of feelings. You know, I really didn't have much invested in the show because I was going with it so much. So then I kind of just let my feelings ride with the show as it went. I think a lot of people who didn't like the show were people like Kiser, where you watched it from the beginning and
week in and week out.
Well, so did I. That's how I watched it the first time, and I liked it. But then once I binge watched it again on my own, I liked it even more because I think you're right, Hougie. When you binge watch it, you realize that they do spend a lot of the show, even though they try to get you to think that Ted's getting over Robin, they spend most of the show on Ted and Robin.
And even when Ted's with other girls, Robin still circulates. And that, like it makes you kind of remember those little things that maybe kind of got like buried in your mind when you're watching it and taking forever, waiting every day for a new episode or waiting months for the next season. It's much easier to hold on to and pick up those things as the shows go on.
So really the weird part is them having the show end with Robin really stayed true to the show. Because that's what the whole show was about, was him getting over Robin. They finally make it seem like he does 2 episodes before the finale or whatever it is, but then he's back with Robin. So I really enjoyed it. I liked it.
Yeah, you guys aren't going to sway me on this one. But let us know out there, PMPers, if you've seen any of these shows, what you like about them, especially How I Met Your Mother, what you felt about that one if you guys watched it. You can find us on the Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, pseudonerdpod.com to find all of those social media handles. Let us know what you thought. Let us know your, maybe your favorite TV series. What was the best finale for you? Maybe one we haven't checked out yet. And Hougie, you need to go watch Firefly.
Yes, you do.
Maybe I'll watch all of it, and then I'll post my thoughts on the old website.
There you go. You guys can look out for that coming forward. So coming up next week, we're going into our month-long podcast, and with the Civil War coming up, we're going to do Disney Marvel. I think we're going to sort of recap where we're at with the Disney Marvel movies and where they're, kind of go from there, see where everything else lies going forward in the Marvel universe. From the home of soon-to-be drafted Cardale Jones to the home of the number 1 overall Jared Goff. I'm Josh Kiser. He is Josh Haddix, and he is Kyle Hoagland. And we will see you guys next week.
Have a good Friday.
See ya.